There's now a cultural awareness about the problem of human slavery, specifically child sex slavery. And that awareness has come to us through the movie Sound of Freedom. Angel Studios produced it, and Jim Caviezel stars as Tim Ballard, the hero of the story, and it's his true story. And I highly recommend it. It's empowering, it's riveting, it's a good movie. Now, he's a real-life hero, Tim Ballard. That's his story. But there's others. And I wanted to bring to you today a group of sisters that I consider living saints. The Sisters of Mary are a group of religious sisters, and they're all over the world. They're in Guatemala, Mexico, Tanzania, the Philippines, Brazil, and they're in these remote areas, hotspots for human trafficking. And they go out 2 by 2 to very remote areas, dangerous areas, areas that are filled with drug traffickers, cartels, organized crime, not to mention the elements, jungles and remote areas. They go out 2 by 2. They go to get these kids who are being saved for them by just people who are holding them for them to come and get. Because there's this poverty that sets a child up for easy pickings. So it's poverty that feeds this sex slavery trade. And so there's certain markers or certain things, that's where that child's going to end up. And so these sisters go in and get them. But I tell you what, the sex traders don't like the sisters because those kids are easy pickings and they're getting all their profits. When the sisters go and rescue these kids and they go 2 by 2 and they go to these remote areas, it's very dangerous. It's like they're putting a target on their back. They have been kidnapped. They've been held at gunpoint. They've been robbed and harassed. These sex traders don't like the Sisters of Mary. Now, they were established by Father Aloysius Schwartz about 5 decades ago after the Korean War in an effort to take care of the war orphans. So those kids on the street, that's why they were founded. And their founder, Father Aloysius, they called him Father Al, he's venerable now. Anyway, that's how they started. But since then, they've saved and rehabilitated and loved and educated, raised 170,000 children. They bring them to their boys and girls' homes and they teach them about Jesus. It's a beautiful success story. They go on to be productive citizens, but not only that, to be some of the best evangelists you'll ever meet, because they learn about the love of Jesus from the sisters. This is where the power of love is so evident. Now, some of these graduates come back and they join the effort to go and find kids and free them. Now, the sisters are fearless. They're going into these dangerous areas. They don't have any backup. They don't have anyone to call. There's no law in there. It's very risky business. They're fearless. And these graduates who come back to help, they're really fearless because they've been in the trades. They've been the victims and they know. When my children were little, I went to a theme park and it was crowded and there was a little boy. He was probably about 4 years old. And this little boy got separated from his parents. It was only temporary, but he was separated. And suddenly he was around people he didn't know. He didn't know where he was. It wasn't familiar territory to him at all. He was so young. He was absolutely terrified. He started to scream and cry. He shook. He was just terrified. And then his parents came and it was all fixed. Everything was good. But imagine children being snatched away in horrific, terrifying situations, being captured by sex traders. You look at kids on the playground. They're laughing, they're playing, they're caught up in the moment, they're innocent. And can you imagine the unexpected capture and thrust into a hellacious life that might not ever end. I'm not a fearless sister of Mary. You're not either. I'm not a trained agent like Tim Ballard. You're not either. We don't work in the surveillance and the technology to get these sex traffickers. But there is something very powerful we can do. And we can go after the devil and Satan in a way that he is not expecting. Stay with me. My goal is to convince you of this. There are physical laws, like the law of gravity. We all have to work within the law of gravity. We can't help it. It is a physical law. It's a reality in our physical world. Well, there are spiritual realities, and sometimes we need to be reminded of them, because the spiritual realm, the unseen world, is as powerful and as real as the real world, as this physical world that we exist in. We're body and we're soul. We're physical and we're spiritual, and we forget the spiritual part and the power that is there. These spiritual laws that just exist for us to use, that the Lord has given us as spiritual weapons. When Father Aloysius established the Sisters of Mary, one of the criteria that he set as their daily routine was that they had to spend 3 hours in prayer a day before they went out and worked. That doesn't count Mass or the other communal prayers they have to do. 3 hours. Because he knew it was really hard work, and it was work against evil and against the devil, and that they needed that fortification. Mother Teresa is the same way. Her sisters, they've got to spend, they do their communal prayer, they do Mass, all these things that they do. But then they have to spend a whole hour in adoration, in addition, before they hit the streets of Calcutta. And I know that there's people on the streets that really need them. And a practical person could look at that and say, oh, they should be out there to be more productive if you put them out. They're wasting a whole hour of daylight when look what they could do in an hour on the streets helping someone. But no, the spiritual laws are set, and there's an undergirding, and it's not just prayer. Bear with me, stick with me. There's a lot to know, and it's empowering and it's exciting, and I want to share it with you, and anyone can do it. And the thing about these spiritual realities, these spiritual weapons that we can employ, they're essential. They're an essential piece in this war against child sex slavery. It kind of reminds me of like World War II. Let's say you're in a resistance group, or the French resistance, and you find that the enemy is going to deploy a bomb and do some terrible damage. And somehow you get in there and you deactivate that bomb. And then the enemy goes to deploy the bomb and it doesn't go off. It's a little bit like that. It's like undercutting him. He doesn't see it coming. He doesn't know how to defend himself against it. Because what drives this child sex slavery, it is the evil forces, and they come from the devil himself. He's real, and we got to go after him. And Jesus is going to show us exactly how to do this. The first reality, the first weapon is prayer and fasting together. When Jesus came to this earth, before he went on his public ministry, which his mission was to take back his territory from Satan. That's his mission, to take back his territory from the devil. The first thing he did was go into the desert to fast and pray. So we should do the same. Jesus did that. He did that too. Before he went in there to take back the territory that belonged to him, we should do it too. The children, they don't belong to anyone else. They belong to God. They belong to their families. So just like Jesus modeled, we should fast and pray. And he taught the disciples about fasting and praying together, that combo. So Jesus had sent out his disciples to preach, to heal, to cast out demons, and they were doing all of that. But there was one demon in a boy they could not cast out. So they bring the boy to Jesus. Of course, he takes care of it. He casts out the demon. But they're curious because they were able to do it for others. Why not this one? Why couldn't we cast out this demon? And Jesus says, it's because this kind can only be cast out with prayer and fasting. The child sex slavery industry, it can only be taken down through prayer and fasting. That's one of the spiritual realities, the spiritual laws like gravity. Prayer and fasting, it's a powerful thing, and it's our weapon to use. And fasting, please don't get caught up about it. If you have to eat because you got to take medicine or something, you can eat something you don't like, and fast from something you like. You can fast from things that you do that you would like to do. There's ways to accommodate it. So don't get too legalistic about it. But if you can fast from food, that's how Jesus modeled it for us. If we can, we should. It's kind of the same for prayer. I'm not going to tell you how to pray. There are so many beautiful ways to pray. Pray the way that you're comfortable with, that connects you with God, and that you'll actually do. Don't set a high bar that you won't do. The next weapon that is a spiritual reality for us to employ is trust. I'm going to read something from the Catechism. Man, tempted by the devil, let his trust in his Creator die in his heart. And it goes on a little bit more about trust. But basically, the first sin of our parents was not just disobedience. The disobedience was a result of not trusting God. And it makes sense that in our modern time, the antidote, of course, being brought to us again, is trust through the divine mercy devotion. When we see the image of divine mercy at the bottom, it says, Jesus, I trust in you. Trust is very powerful. I want to read you one quote. This is from Faustina's diary. And Jesus is talking to her. Your great trust in me forces me to continually grant you graces. You have great and incomprehensible rights over my heart, for you are a daughter of complete trust. What if we could be sons and daughters of complete trust and have incomprehensible rights over the heart of Jesus? This is quite profound. And in her diary, Jesus teaches her a lot about trust. But let's be clear about one thing. Trust is not presumption. Presumption takes people for granted. Presumption uses people. Trust requires a relationship. When you trust someone, you do what they say. It goes both ways. And Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me. So if we trust him, we do that. He also said, this kind of demon is only cast out through prayer and fasting. So we can trust him on that. It's the truth. The next spiritual reality is humility. I've got a quote here that just sums it up. This is from St. Vincent de Paul. The most powerful weapon to conquer the devil is humility. For he does not know at all how to employ it, neither does he know how to defend himself from it. That is so true, and it's so right on. So I would recommend praying the litany of humility. It's set up so that when we fool ourselves and we don't think that we have pride, it shows us our areas of pride and shows us how to insert humility into those areas. It's really eye-opening, so I highly recommend that. For example, if you work in an office and the last one out is supposed to turn off the copy machine, and the next day you go into work and you get a little reprimand from your boss says, you didn't turn off the copy machine. Make sure you do it next time. Well, maybe it wasn't your turn. Maybe you didn't leave last. It wasn't your situation. You're not at fault. A humble response that could be offered up that will undercut the devil would be just receive the reprimand. Don't defend yourself. It's of little consequence. And take that. It might be hard for you, but that will undercut the devil every time. And the fourth spiritual reality that I want to talk about that we can use as a weapon is actually love. That seems kind of obvious, but Saint Therese taught us that little things, the way you clear the table, the way you shake someone's hand, little things done with great love are very, very powerful. It fortifies them. It's the way we make everything potent exponentially. Now that we have these spiritual weapons, fasting and prayer, trust, humility, love, there's a strategy for implementing them. And we're going to look to Francis de Sales, John the 23rd, and Padre Pio. And what did they do? They sent their guardian angels on errands. Errands to complete their mission in life. And so, and they taught us that the angels want to help us with God's will in our lives. So we should send our guardian angel to pick out one child for us. One. Now there's 6 million currently in the sex trade. But bear with me, there's a reason why we only want them to pick out one for us to implement these weapons on their behalf. First of all, who can identify with 6 million? I mean, I know that I can't. And when something is that insurmountable, you just kind of like, what can I do? And then you do nothing. There is a power in the one. Jesus taught in a parable, leave the 99, go after the one. We've been taught by the saints, especially like Saint Catherine of Siena, the value of one human soul. She said she'd die 1,000 deaths to save that one soul. That a soul, a human being, is worth more than the whole universe. We go after the one. When Jesus was on the cross, if there had only been one of us, he would have done it. But he did it for each one. It's a mystery. And in the movie, there's an example of this. So there's this rich guy. He is on the side of rescuing these kids. He wants to do the right thing, and he's helping out with the effort. And they want to create a trap to trap the sex traffickers and their customers, and at the same time then rescue 50 kids. So it requires a lot of money because they got to rent a whole island and get a whole big thing built and set up for this whole trap. So he pulls out and he says, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to fund this. I'm out. And it's going to stop the whole procedure. But the character, Tim Ballard, he sends him a note and a picture of the girl that he is trying to find. And he says, don't do it for the 50. Do it for her. Do it for one. And he looks at the picture of a girl, young girl. And suddenly her value as a human being is so important that he'll do it for one. So this is a very powerful concept. When we think about the one, then we can identify two, and it motivates us, keeps us praying, keeps us fasting, keeps us being humble and trusting, and it keeps us on track. So think about your own children. You could think about your own children, or your own grandchildren, or children down the street, children at the playground. Think about one of them. Think about your mom or your dad, and you're walking down the hallway at night. Say goodnight to your children, and there's an empty bed. Or you're at the dinner table, and there's an empty chair at the dinner table. And you have no idea where that child is. They could be anywhere in the whole world, and they're gone. They're probably never coming back, and you will never know what happened to them. That's the power of the one that keeps us motivated. We can trust that everything Jesus taught us about prayer and fasting and humility, that these things are true. We can trust it. And I think that if we really believe it and we really trust Jesus, we could try to be like the Sisters of Mary, a little bit fearless in who we share this message with. We can tell people about it ourselves, or we can convince them to watch this video all the way to the end. But this, sometimes we're afraid to share something with someone. Let's not be. Let's step out. Take them for an example. Exercise that fearless muscle a little bit. Because if we share it, then the one that we're doing will turn into 2 and 3 and 4. Maybe you preach, maybe you teach, maybe you belong to several groups. When we think about it and look at our lives, we do have maybe more influence than we think we do. And then there are a few people who are connected with somebody who has a big reach on social media or is somewhat famous. And if we would be fearless in sharing the message with them, they might repackage it, they might make it better, put it out to their people, but the contents, the knowledge and the strategy is very important. And we can really make a big difference. The Sisters of Mary only fear 2 things: sin and not doing God's will. May it be the same for us, that we can be fearless as we follow Jesus Christ.